Maine is a beautiful state characterized by its natural beauty, rocky coastline, and welcoming residents. I can honestly say that I would not want to live anywhere else, but like any place that you choose to call home, there will always be drawbacks, and although Maine, in my opinion, is one of the best states to live in the country, there are some definite negatives of living here, and so in this video, we're going to discuss the pros and cons of living in Maine. You're going to want to make sure to listen till the end, because if you're thinking about moving here, you are not going to want to miss the cons that we talk about at the end of the video. But first, let's start off with all the good stuff. And for reference, when I talk about Maine, I'm talking about the southern part of the state, which is where I live. And by the way, let me introduce myself. My name's Cam Avery. I'm a local resident and real estate agent with the Avery Realty Group and Keller Williams Coastal Realty. This channel is all about relocating to southern Maine and Seacoast, New Hampshire. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely consider subscribing to the channel. And thank you so much for doing so. Maine is a huge state, so big in fact that you can pretty much fit all of New England inside of Maine. So I'm not going to even pretend to know what it's like living in Caribou, Maine, which is 5 hours and 15 minutes away from my home in Kittery. I do have a friend, however, who grew up there and said that there was pretty much one movie theater and a lot of snowmobiling trails, and that was about it. So based on my own knowledge, in this video, we're going to focus on the southern part of the state, which is where the majority of the population of Maine lives, and includes the major city of Portland and towns like Kennebunk, Kittery, York, Scarborough, and more. The first pro of living in Maine is the natural beauty of the state. Maine is truly a unique place to live, especially if you're close to the ocean or a lake. As a resident, I often forget or take for granted that we live in a place that hundreds of thousands of people choose to vacation every year. That should say something about just how beautiful Maine is, and there are so many amazing places to visit inside of the great state of Maine. From the cobblestone streets of the Old Port to the dozens of small seaside villages to the beautiful mountain ranges in the Rangeley Lakes region and Acadia National Park, a literal thousands of lakes and rivers all throughout the state, Maine truly has something for everyone to appreciate when it comes to its natural beauty, and it's one of the main reasons that I love living here, no pun intended. In fact, I love living in Maine so much that when I go on vacation, I vacation in Maine. We go up to the Rangeley Lakes region in the fall every year, and let me tell you, if you want to see some of the best foliage you've ever seen in your life, you need to check out Maine in the fall. The seasonality of the state also contributes to its beauty. Living here, you're going to experience the beauty of all four seasons, and each one has its own special characteristics and make living here unique and exciting. The second pro of living in Maine is the cost of living. We talk a lot in our videos about how the cost of living in southern Maine is on average higher than what we see nationwide. However, in comparison to the other states in New England, Maine is actually the most affordable state to live. With lower property taxes and plenty of housing options, if you are thinking about moving to the Northeast, Maine is actually going to be a very affordable option in comparison to states like Massachusetts and New Hampshire in most cases. The average annual cost of living in Maine, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis in 2021, was $50,000, which beats out all other states in New England. The average housing cost in the state of Maine is around $1,500 per month, and the average utility cost is around $400 per month. While these numbers are changing as a result of inflation, it's safe to say that Maine is going to be the most affordable state if you plan on moving to New England. And if you want to learn more about moving here, I wanted to let you know that we actually created a complete relocation guide to southern Maine. You can download it totally for free just by clicking the link right in the description below. The third pro of living in Maine is the great sense of community and the laid-back nature of the people. New England is a very fast-paced place to live, especially if you're coming from the Midwest or down south, but I feel like Maine, out of all the states in the Northeast, embraces a slower pace of life better and is known for its tight-knit towns and communities. The supportive communities in Maine, I believe, are one of the major contributors to Maine being consistently in the top 3 states for the lowest crime rate in the entire country. When we go away for vacation, I'll let my neighbors know to keep an eye on the house for us and vice versa. Everybody in the neighborhood really looks out for each other, which is a really nice thing. New Englanders can be known for their cold and harsh demeanors, and while Mainers may appear to be that from the outside, I promise the majority of people from Maine are really great people who honestly care about each other and their communities. For me, there is just something intangible about living in Maine that, as corny as it sounds, it truly feels like the way life should be, and it's why I choose to call Maine home. But there are some definite drawbacks, so now let's talk about the cons. I think for me, the biggest con of living in Maine is the seasonality of the weather and the local business. As soon as Labor Day is over, many of the restaurants and shops that are open during the tourist season close their doors, which lets us all know that unfortunately we're in for another long winter. The lack of business combined with the cold and snowy weather can really lead to some definitely dreary and lonely days, which make me feel like hopping on a plane, flying down to Florida, and never coming back home. Thankfully, just about the time everyone here is sick of feeling like we're hibernating, springtime is here like it is right now, the weather gets nice, and the feeling of new life is in the air. It's just beautiful out here today. It's super important to know that if you're planning on moving to Maine and you've only been here in the summertime, that Maine does not look the same in the winter. It can feel like a ghost town sometimes, and so I want to make sure that you are prepared for that if you plan on moving here. If that's really not your thing, then maybe buying a vacation home in Maine would be a better option for you. The second con of living in Maine is that there is an income tax. Now, chances are you're coming from a state that already has an income tax, so you may be wondering, why are you even saying that this is a con at all? In fact, if you're coming from California, you can just ignore this altogether because you're going to be paying significantly less taxes living here in Maine. But because I live in southern Maine, so close to New Hampshire, a state that has no income tax, the decision to live in Maine meant that I had to be okay with a 5.5% income tax, which I wouldn't have had to pay if I lived in New Hampshire. That being said, Maine does have significantly lower property taxes than New Hampshire, so I would definitely recommend speaking with your financial advisor to determine exactly what state would be best for your specific situation. That being said, even with the income tax, I made the choice to live in Maine because, quite frankly, I like it better, even if there is a stupid income tax. The third con of living in Maine is that there just aren't a lot of people here. Now, once again, if that's what you're looking for, then you've found it in Maine. The total population is about 1.3 million, making it the 42nd most populous state. It also ranks 39th in area, so when you put those numbers together, that makes Maine the 38th state in population density with 43 people per square mile. In comparison, New Jersey is number 1 with 1,263 people per square mile. Massachusetts has 901, California has 254, and Alaska is the absolute lowest with 1.3 people per every square mile. If you're looking for a hustling and bustling place to live at all times, even Portland, the largest city in Maine, only has 68,000 residents. The truth is, there just aren't a ton of people in Maine, and so if you are coming from a state that has a much higher population density, it may take some serious adjustment living here. So as you can see, there is a lot to love about living in Maine, and honestly, even the cons could be pros depending on exactly what you're looking for. With an amazing natural beauty, low cost of living, and tight-knit communities, Maine is an ideal place to live if you can deal with the harsh winters, income tax, and low population. One of the most important things to consider when thinking about moving here is the real cost of living. You want to make sure that you can afford it. So we actually made this video right here going over the actual numbers of the cost of living in Maine so that you can compare it to your cost of living now and make sure that Maine is going to be a good fit. So I would go ahead, click that video now, and make sure you watch that.